it's Claire. Welcome back to my channel. Today we have something super exciting for you. My very first guest blogger, host, guest, what is another word for it? I don't know, but it doesn't matter. I have my first person, a guest, yay! If you've been reading the blog, you'll know that I recently started accepting guest posters, and Ming was my first one, and I'll do a video with him eventually, but my second one was Alvaro, and I'm super excited to share his story on video too. He's younger than I am, and he's already on his way to debt freedom, and super close to being paid off. I find his story super inspiring, and I know you guys will too, so before we get right into the interview, let's hit that like button and hit subscribe if we haven't already. Okay, so Alvy, thank you for coming onto my channel, first of all.
Of course, thank you so much for having me.
So I guess first let's just start off by who you are and where you live.
Yeah, so I am currently a 27 years old. I think I'm 27. 27. It's been a tough year for sure, but 27. I am currently living in Portland, Oregon with my girlfriend. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment, and we moved up here in about 2019. So I grew up, lower middle class, working poor. My parents are both immigrants from Mexico, and I grew up in the central coast of California, but wanted to pursue other things in life. So I ended up going to school in Eugene, Oregon, and then now I'm here in Portland. I am a working professional too, so that's always sort of a nice little, mix of being an administrator and also trying to navigate some other things I'm working on too.
Awesome. So what was money like in your household growing up?
So for me, it was always a running joke in my household. My dad, first of all, I learned about money way too young. I learned about debt. I learned about credit cards, right? Because I was having to help my parents do all that stuff, especially being immigrants. They didn't learn English. And to this day, my dad never learned, and my mom still doesn't really know that much. So I was always writing checks. I was always cashing checks for my parents, setting off bills and stuff like that. So I knew how to write a check when I was like 7 because I had to fill it out for him. So the joke in my family, in my household, was always you take from one credit card to pay off another credit card, which to a 9-year-old kid or a 7-year-old kid doesn't really make that much sense because of course all you see is the card and you just see swipe and you can buy stuff. But as I grew up and as I learned about credit cards and sort of all the nuances that come with them, I realized like, oh crap, like this is not a sustainable way to live. And also we're technically broke because all the stuff we buy is owed money. We owe it to somebody. So I learned about finances really young from, I like to say what not to do because everyone in my family was basically doing everything that you should not be doing with money. And that was one of the things that really wanted me to learn about this stuff.
So how do you think, just from being a kid and starting that young and understanding debt and understanding, having to pay one credit card with another credit card, how do you think that impacted you as a kid and young adult?
So I think it really impacted me in 2 different ways. One, as I was growing up, I thought that was the norm. So I thought everyone lived that way, credit cards, and what do you mean you don't have to send a credit card bill every month? And I really didn't understand fully the implications that has on, interest rates and how much you have to send to the creditors every single month. I just sort of thought living with debt was normal. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to when I was about maybe 24, 25, it really started to click in my head. And I reflected a lot on my life as a kid. And I thought, that's really not healthy. And it's not the way I want to live my life. And those were sort of the 2 aha moments, if you will, where I realized that if something wasn't right, or I guess a better way to say it is those were the 2 aha moments of where it sort of came full circle to me. And I really learned a lot.
So do you feel like in any way, like, did it shape your beliefs on money? And like, did you feel anxious about money? Did you feel fearful about money? Or were you just kind of like, I don't want to do what my family had to do, like that they were forced to do. I want to do better because of X, Y, Z, or because I have the ability to. Like, do you feel like it had any impacts on you emotionally or mentally, or, even just your attitude towards money?
Yeah, definitely. There was always the scarcity mindset. And I've learned, it was sort of a learned mentality for me because of the fact that my dad always talked about wanting to save and save and save. Don't go out and spend on X, or don't go out and spend a ton of money on Y, because you never know what tomorrow has. And I've really tried to flip that mentality in terms of an abundance mindset. I'm healthy, I work, I'm a relatively young guy. I have to believe that there's a lot of wealth in this world, that I deserve a part of it. So growing up, it was always scarcity, right? It was always save, save, save. No one ever talked to me about how to spend money, how to make sure I invest money, how to make sure I have enough to cover my bills, or anything along those lines. It was always just, you got paid this week, you better make sure you hang on to as much as you can, as opposed to now, the mindset is more of, hey, I got paid, let me go out and buy, it's okay if I spend $20 at sushi, or if I spend $10 at Starbucks. You know what? There's so much out in this world, and I deserve a piece of it. So let me not just focus on what I don't have, but let me focus on what I can actually afford.
So you mentioned earlier one of the turning points for you that made you want to learn about money and start moneying. What was the other turning point for you?
Really, the biggest one was when my father passed away. So unfortunately, I did lose my dad on December 14th of 2019, so roughly a little over a year ago. And I'll tell you what, Chloe, having to go through the grieving process is already tough enough, right? No matter who you are, whether you have a good relationship with your parents or you don't, when it's someone that you genuinely care about, losing them and no longer having their spirit, their laughter, their voice in your life really makes you sort of take everything back, and you just take a step back from life, right? So along those same lines, when my dad passed away, as we talked about, he had a lot of credit card debt, right? It was always that joke. You take from one to pay off another one. So he had roughly $10,000 in credit card debt, which I know to some people who are watching this are probably thinking $10,000, that's nothing. But he also only made maybe $20,000 a year. Right? He was a manual laborer. He worked as a janitor. He wasn't making a ton of dough. And those credit cards were more so out of necessity for us to live, to keep a roof over our head. And when I was unfortunately his executor, if you want to call it that, of his estate, which there was no estate, it was all just these credit cards, and having to hound them off of our family and say, hey, my dad passed away, his credit card debt went with him, and unfortunately you're never going to see any of that money. Those two moments in life should never have to meet, where you have to go through a death of a family member or a loved one and have to figure out their finances. And unfortunately for me, those two did meet. Now, had my dad been able to accumulate some wealth, we would have maybe had a different conversation, and maybe this sort of epiphany of my life doesn't happen, but everything happens for a reason, and it did. And I just vowed to myself, I hope I never have to put my family through that. And I know my dad didn't do it in spite, but it was just out of necessity again. But I want to be able to, if and when, obviously when I do pass, I want to leave a legacy of, he left me a house, or I left a car, or I left college savings, or whatever, right? A trust. That's what was really the defining moment for me to want to take care of my finances.
Well, first, I'm so sorry for your loss. I can't believe everything that you went through. So you were kind of like hurdled into, okay, I have to grow up and I have to figure out how to money, like pretty suddenly, it sounds like. So when you're like thrown into the situation that you probably weren't prepared for or couldn't have imagined, like, where did you begin? I mean, especially when you're starting from like zero, where you're starting from like, okay, I know what not to do, but like, what the heck, like, where do you go? Like Google, how do I money? What was your first step? And luckily we live in a world where there's just so much information out there today. So I'm curious, like, what were the resources that you were like, okay, this makes sense, or like, I don't like this stuff, but I'm really into this guy's my way of thinking and things like that?
Yeah, so it was literally what you said. I Googled, how do I money? A little bit different verbiage.
The podcast, how to money?
Yeah, I was like, help, I'm broke, right? But I literally just went online and I Googled, how to, I think it was something along the lines of how to build wealth or something along those lines, right? How to manage money. And then, anyone that does that right now, you're going to see a plethora of articles, videos, links. People have entire websites dedicated to this stuff. But in particular, where I started was Google. And then it sort of opened Pandora's box for me in terms of all of the YouTube finance people and even just finance authors and writers and people that are actually younger, but still older also, who have their techniques have stood the test of time, shall we say. So in particular, Marco at Whiteboard Finance, he was a huge inspiration for me. Dave Ramsey, of course, everyone who's on this journey has probably heard of Dave Ramsey. And then Aaron Lowry, Broke Millennial, was another huge influence in my life. And then I believe the other one was Ramit Sethi. I think that's how you say his last name.
I Will Teach You How to Be Rich, that guy.
Yeah, love that guy. Those four were probably the most instrumental in wanting to understand what I was going through. And particularly, I believe number one was, I believe it was Marco at Whiteboard Finance, but I wasn't quite there yet. Marco was just was at the time a little bit more advanced for me. So I gravitated towards Dave Ramsey and his sort of no BS, easy to follow, do 1, 2, and 3 type of teaching made sense for me. And it was super easy. I'm a very progressional kind of thinker, and his method has held true. And it's one that I recommend to almost everybody that I talk to. Fast forward a little bit though, I've sort of deviated a little bit from Dave. And I think I'm learning more of like the nuances and the small minutia of where I can have my own flexibility in his path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like there's like you either love Dave Ramsey or you hate Dave Ramsey because he's so extreme in his view of debt. And so I started out definitely same. Started with the baby steps, started with the envelope method. The envelope method never really worked for me, but the snowball method and the debt avalanche, like those both really worked for me. But now the more that I know about money and how to build wealth, the more I'm like, I don't really buy it. The whole, like, don't ever have any debt. I get that that's really important for some people. And I also get that that's really important just as a mindset. Right. But I'm definitely more of a believer of like, if you're going into debt in order to build wealth, it's okay. It's good debt. Like if you're going into real estate or if you're, I mean, really, that's the only one I can think of to go into for. But what's your take on it now that you've grown a little bit beyond Dave Ramsey?
I think it's sort of the argument that I don't know if you know who this is, but Jeff Cavalier is a huge fitness Instagrammer and he's a huge fitness YouTuber. He talks about the white rice versus brown rice argument where people get so caught up on the minutia of it all that they don't even start, right? They want to go on a diet and they're like, well, that's organic and this isn't. And that's brown rice is technically better for you than white rice. And it's too much. I think Dave Ramsey is wonderful to start and just begin your journey. If you get to like, maybe let's say baby step 2, baby step 3, and you're like, I don't really want to follow him per se. You've at least done all the self-exploration that you need to understand why you maybe don't want to follow him. I think he's a great place to start because it's very easy, right? Baby steps 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 7. But eventually you're going to get to a point where it's like, you either love him and you're going to do exactly what he says, or you're going to deviate. And I'm personally on that path of deviation right now.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Okay. So we stopped off at like diving into your personal finance and how you started learning. So what were the first couple of steps that you did take? So you started learning. What was your first move?
This is going to sound really terrible. And, I'm just going to be completely honest. I have made every single finance mistake you can think of. So that's why.
How you learn.
Exactly. So back in 2000, I think it was 2015 or something along those lines, I was working a job that was paying me relatively well. And I had the opportunity to open up a 401k. I did that. And then when I left that job, it was just sort of sitting there, slowly growing with the market, right? And then when 2017, mostly like 2018, 19 hit, that's when I really wanted to attack my debt and begin this journey. So I unfortunately cashed out my 401k, which I don't recommend to a lot of people. Yeah.
Oh, it hurt.
Yeah, I lost maybe like $4,000.
And like not even thinking about the like growth that you missed out. And I feel for you. That's painful. I'm sure it wasn't that much though, as young as you were.
Yeah, it was only roughly, I think it was under $10,000, but still I'd lost a good amount of it just immediately. That was the very first step. And it was sort of like the I got to blow something up in order to really show myself how committed I am to this. And that was one of the things that I did. I cashed it out, but I did pay off a ton of debt. And that was the very first thing where I said, okay, if I'm going to commit, I need to commit to this right and actually show myself how committed I am to it. And that was my first step to actually start my progression.
Okay. So first step was a mistake, but you learned from it. And at least it's a mistake, not in a mistake of like, I bought a new car that put me in debt and took me 10 years to pay off. Instead, you're like, you know what? I'm so into this, debt freedom that I'm going to cash out my 401. Damn you, Daddy Ramsey.
I just thought to myself, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't have done that.
I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
I get that though. Cause I like, especially switching over from the mindset of like, debt is bad, avoid, to like, okay, I want to be smart and I want to listen to the numbers rather than the emotion behind it. It's a tough leap to make. And it's also just like, it's like, you have to stretch that muscle. You have to stretch that mind muscle of like, okay, debt can be good if you are using it correctly. And I feel like I've had those very similar experiences where it's like, oh, no. I'm not going to stop paying $2,000 extra a month of my student loan debt, even though I only have a 3.5% interest rate on it. So it's like, well, you're not really going to build wealth that way. So it's like kind of silly for you to put $2,000 extra a month on it when you can handle the payment. So yeah, I feel like the best learning happens in those mistakes or in just like making that sudden jump and then being like, okay, I'll figure it out later.
Yeah, maybe in retrospect, I could have maybe taken a couple of seconds, but that's sort of the whole point of it, right? You, at least with me and Dave Ramsey, I tried it out and I thought, okay, it's working for me. But then when I started listening to Ramit, that's when I was like, oh wait, I can do both. And it's still like, okay, I'm still going to get there. So that was when it was like starting to move those gears in my head and say, well, I don't have to do this exactly how he says.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be like totally black and white, which is something I struggle with too. It's like either or. You can't do like both things, and learning that I think has been important too. Okay. So your first step was a mistake. So I guess before we get into what you generally spend in a month,
I gotta tell you, I'm gonna put that like on a t-shirt. I don't even know how to say it. Like
my first financial step was a huge mistake.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Don't do this.
So many people. I mean, think about how many mistakes you haven't taken or how many mistakes you still have the opportunity to make.
Oh yeah.
We're gonna make more mistakes. And like, especially I've been recently looking at getting into real estate, and I'm like, I'm such a perfectionist that I'm like, I just want to get it. I want to know. And like, I'll be a perfectionist to the point where I will wait to do it because I want to make sure that it's as not risky as possible. But at the same time, it's like that analysis paralysis of like, well, have a bias toward action, as Brandon Turner always says, is like, just do it. Just do it and you'll learn and you'll figure it out. It's better to just do it and learn from it than to constantly be thinking about it and take years to ever start. So where are you at right now on your financial journey?
So as of today, and actually one of my accounts actually updated. So as of today, I'm looking at it right now. I only owe $1,000 on my student loans. Yeah.
Woo!
And I have a car lease, or if you're a Dave Ramseyan, a fleece of $12,213.40.
Okay. Woo. So what's the goal? So that's where you're at right now, but where are you going?
So the goal is to be completely 100% debt-free by the end of this year.
Okay.
Probably October, November time, but just at the end of the year, that's the main goal.
All right. I feel like you're so going to do that. Like, that'll be easy for you.
Yeah. And those student loans should be gone by the end of this month. I'm hoping one more paycheck. Boom. Done.
That's going to be such a good feeling. You'll be like, curse you, leftover 401k, but now throw all that money into investments. Okay, so let's talk about what your typical monthly spend looks like.
Yeah, so let me actually pull it up because
Yay!
It just goes on clockwork now. I really don't even pay that much attention to it. Okay, I got it pulled up.
That's such a good feeling though, to be at the point where you don't pay any attention to it. Like that, isn't that just like, that's like financial independence, like level like 1 or 2, where you're like, oh, I'm not worried about it anymore. I'm not thinking about when my payday is.
That's the thing. That experience of when you're, maybe a 16 to 20 and you hand your card to someone, you're like, I think this will go through.
Yep.
Okay, cool. I did go through.
Yep.
You know,
It's never feeling that again. Like, I can't tell you the last time I was worried. And like, I mean, into my 20s, I was that person where I was like, this will be fine. Like, oh, give her later. Like, not having no idea, no idea anything about personal finance other than the envelope method. And just anyway. So, okay, share your numbers.
So as of right now, I spend $1,087 on rent. And again, that's 2-bedroom apartment in Portland, Oregon. And I split that right down the middle with my girlfriend. So we both pay that. My cell phone bill is $75. My iTunes cloud storage, $3. My car insurance, $109, and that's including the renter's insurance that we have for our house. I was paying for a gym membership for $35, but of course with the lockdown, those are on pause right now. But I still budget for it, I guess. I have the car payment, which is $200 flat, and then I have my Audible subscription, which is $15 also flat. So total expenses in a month is $1,519.
Oh my God, that's so low. Was food in there?
So that was something I wanted to kind of touch on is I budget in essentials only budget. So I just need to know what my expenses.
It's the anti-budget.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay. So do you have a general idea of how much money you are spending on food every month?
So generally, I would say I probably spend about $2,000. So let's add another $500 to this. And that's probably in the mix of eating out, groceries, and anything else that I just randomly spend money on, mostly coffee.
That's not bad. So what is that? So if you're spending about $2,000 a month, what's your income every month?
So my income is roughly $3,600 post-tax in my bank account.
And so you're putting all of that, what are you doing with the rest of the $1,600?
Going right to those loans.
Nice. Okay. So then are you doing any investing at the same time that you're focusing on paying things off? And if so,
at the moment, I am not. That's one of my goals for 2021 is to begin investing. I'm sort of, again, still following the Dave plan where I want to start just making sure that my debts are taken care of. Really, the biggest one is my student loans. So once those are taken care of, I'm going to do sort of like the Ramsey plan where you kind of do a little bit of all. And that's when I'm going to start investing.
Okay. So then even when you're talking about you're not doing any investing, does that include like a 403B, a 401k, none of that stuff right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so that's what you're going to start with. Does your employer offer you a match?
They do, but it's not the best. It's 25 cents up to 3%, I believe. So it's...
Oh yeah, that's not very good.
And I think
yeah,
it's not the best.
That's fair. I was going to get all financial coaching on you and be like, get that match. What are you doing? But 25 cents up to 3%. What the hell?
Yeah, that's nothing. When I was at my job in California with the original 401k, they were doing 6% dollar for dollar. So
yeah, like 100%. Like, come on. I've never heard of that before. 25% on the 4%. Is that just for 2020 because of the pandemic?
To my understanding, it's primarily like 2019 into 2020, and I don't even think they're going to do a match for next year because of everything that happened. So,
jeez, that's terrible. Oh, that's. Yeah. But okay, I won't harass you for that then.
But that is also why I'm looking for different jobs to give me like a better match.
Yes, absolutely. My sister's in a similar situation where they don't even have a retirement plan. So all she's got is a Roth IRA, and I'm just like, oh, you need to get out of there.
Yeah.
But okay. All right. So very cool. That's impressive too, that you're putting $1,600. Did you ever think you would be putting that much money on debt a month?
No, to be honest, I always said to myself like, I could do maybe at the most $500. So to be in a position where I can send this much is both, a blessing, and it also takes a lot of hard work because I have to constantly remind myself. And that's why I have my goals right in front of my desk area of what I'm aiming for. This isn't all just to not go on vacation, label myself a minimalist, which I kind of am, but it's for a reason. I'm suffering for a year to be able to then flourish for the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm. So I am really big into values-based budgeting, which is really just like, instead of like the arbitrary rules and things like that, you're focusing on putting all your resources in the place that you value most. Do you feel like you do that? Like you reflect that? And if so, would you say like financial independence and financial freedom is your number one, and that's why $1,600 is going there?
Yes. So It's very much that. And it's also one of those things that I really don't, I spend frivolously, or not frivolously, I spend lucratively on things that I really value, right? Value-based budgeting. Clothes, hardly ever spend any money. Shoes, really don't care for them. Food, coffee, experiences, those are my top three that I try to spend money on because that to me is what's worth it. Clothes, whatever, I wear the same things pretty much all the time. But it's one of those things that I really do focus on it, but I don't try to, if I have a budget where it's like zero-based budget, every dollar has to have an assignment. To me, it's just, I don't live like that. My life's too fluid. I really don't care for it personally, but that's just me. That's why it's personal finance.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and what I found, it's really interesting. And a lot of the people I talk to about money, a lot of men like the anti-budget. Like they like the freedom of just knowing that the things that matter are going there. And a lot of women like a more dollars or zero-based budget or whatever, or values-based or whatever. And it's just interesting to see all the different ways that people are reaching their goals. One of the things I was actually going to ask you is, so when you made the decision, okay, I want to be debt-free, how did you decide how you were going to do that? So what I mean is, like, how did you come across and decide the anti-budget was the thing that you wanted to do? And how did you discover that $1,600 a month was going to be your goal?
I think it was trial and error. Again, I've made a ton of mistakes, and I tried the zero-based budgeting. I tried the cash envelope system that you referenced earlier. None of them stuck. None of them were I always dreaded having to do it. And that's when I realized that, maybe this isn't the way it works for me. And when I tried this approach where I just listed, I don't even remember who I learned that from. It's just what I need to survive, and that's it. And then if I can cover that, I know I'm good. Everything else on top of that is gravy that I can spend wherever I decide to. So that was the thing that you got to start somewhere. And anyone watching this, and if you think that my method works for you, try it, give it a shot, see how it feels, check in with yourself within a month. But you have to start somewhere. Everyone always, like I told you, everyone gets caught up on, well, this is the very best method to do something. You don't know me. You don't know what I think is the best. Just try whatever the hell. You try whatever the hell you want. Try 7 different budgets. Try cash envelope. And
if you fail 100 times, maybe the 101st time you'll get it. I think it took me 6 months until I actually stuck to a budget and figured out how to make it work for me. Because in my head, a budget was rigid, and a budget wasn't really something that you should be changing all of the time. And understanding and realizing, like, oh, no. Your budget should change based off of your schedule, like the way that I do budgeting. And like, I can't always have the same budget when different things in my life are going on. And even like coming to those realizations, like whoever is starting out, it's going to take some time. Like you're going to fail, you're going to fail a lot. And there's so many different types of budgeting. So with your anti-budget, do you include that $1,600 as an essential expense? And then the $500 left over is just because you've accounted that extra money on debt?
So I don't have it as a line item in my anti-budget, but I just pretty much always gauge it. And again, that's sort of why I like it, because it gives me that fluidity of, do I want to send 1,600? Do I want to only send 1,000 and spend an extra 500 on something else? Maybe I had a huge medical expense that came up.
Right.
It gives me that freedom, and that's why I don't write it down personally.
But the important thing is you're living under your means. So you have the freedom to decide how much money you're going to put on anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess that kind of leads me into, what would be the number one piece of advice you would give somebody who is starting out and is like Googling, how do I build wealth?
Like I was a couple of years ago. I would say the number one thing that I would always recommend to anyone, as Siri pops up, is the excuse that you keep telling yourself about, wealthy people are corrupt, wealthy people are the devil, and whatever you want to call it, right? Is just something that you learned. Money overall is just going to make you more of what you are. I believe that's a Dave Ramsey quote, and I think it's so true. If I had $1 million right now, I know for sure I would take care of my mom, I would take care of my family, I would start college savings for my nephews, and I would go out and just help people who have helped me in my life. I'm not corrupt. I don't think I'm corrupt, and I don't think the $1 million would make me corrupt. So all of that to say, you deserve to be wealthy. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, especially people who grew up potentially in lower middle class neighborhoods, who just seem to always brush off, well, they were born on that side of the street. They had two parents. They had a car. They went to that school. Those excuses are just that. They're excuses. And you, if you're watching this and you're interested in personal finance, you deserve wealth too. So just remember that.
Oh, I love that. That like made me feel all the like, oh, yes. Yeah. I so agree with that. And I think that's really true. Cool. Well, I mean, that's pretty much all the questions that I had for you today. So thank you so freaking much for joining. I'm super stoked to share this and hopefully we'll do something else in the future too, because this is awesome.
Yeah, no, it's been a true pleasure, Chloe, and I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. And I hope whoever's watching this, go subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, go head over to Alvaro's channel and subscribe for sure. And where else can they find you?
So Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all Alvy Macias. So ALVYMACIS.
Awesome. And I will put that up for them too, and I'll leave some links below. So thank you so much. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed having a guest on the show, on the channel. And if you're interested in being on the channel, hit me up in the comments below. Basically, I just want to share people's money stories because I feel like the more we share and talk about our money stories, the better we'll all get with our money, because it'll become normal to talk about things like how to make a budget and how to stick to a budget and how to budget for things that we never knew we had to budget for. So thanks again for watching. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the like button and be sure to hit subscribe. But thanks again, and I'll talk to you guys next week.